guys, so this video is going to go on our myths about Japan playlist, and just before we get into it just want to clarify a couple of things. It does seem that one of the reasons that myths about Japan are so prevalent is that some people really want them to be true, and we've noticed that when we make videos that point out that certain things that are said about Japan are not true, that they are actually, in fact, myths. Some people really don't like it, right? But our videos are anything and everything about Japan, so that's just what we do. A couple other things I want to clarify. As with all these videos, there are exceptions. So in this case, there are people that we know who work really hard at their jobs, who work really hard in their homes, keeping their homes nice and looking after their kids and doing all the things that they're supposed to do. So we do know some really hard-working people who are definitely not lazy, without a doubt. Also, nothing wrong with being lazy, you know. Obviously, people get the benefits of whatever they do or otherwise, so if people want to be lazy and not do anything, well, obviously that's their business, isn't it? The only reason we're talking about this is that our videos are anything and everything about Japan, and also we think this helps dispel another couple of myths, and the myths would probably be, you know, Japanese people work really hard. That's often what's said, sort of across a blanket statement that Japanese people work really hard. And we've actually talked about this on previous videos, and there are some people who work really hard, but there's also a lot that are really lazy and pretend that they're really busy and that they work really hard. The other one is that Japanese people are really neat and tidy, and that is the impression that you get, but there are a lot of exceptions to this. Now, what's actually set this video off is, it's been on my mind a while. Every 2 or 3 months, the elementary school that one of our kids goes to gives us some newsletters to spread around the neighbourhood. And so every 2 or 3 months, I go for a walk around and stick all these newsletters in everybody's letterboxes. And this morning I was out there doing it, and I saw what I always see, and there's a few things that illustrate laziness, right? One common one that really baffles me is letterboxes that are full, like full to overflowing, where I come along and there'll be loads of newsletters hanging out of them, or just, you know, mail and junk mail and all sorts of stuff just hanging out of the letterbox, and to the point where I can't even get this one slip of paper in because it's just chock full. And the people's car will be there, and you can hear the air conditioners running, and they're home, right? They're home, and they obviously haven't emptied their letterbox for weeks, maybe, to get it that full. There was actually one guy today sitting outside his door, and this is actually a funny thing too. You see this quite a lot. Guys sitting outside the front door of their house, smoking, because they're not allowed to smoke inside, or they choose not to smoke inside. And almost always they have the same thing. They'll have a can of coffee, one of the ones with lids, with a lid, and that's their ashtray. I see this all the time, right? And they'll be sitting outside the door. Sometimes they're just sitting on the ground, or sometimes they'll just have a little camping stool or something like that. And there was a guy today, and that's what he was doing. He's sitting there smoking at a little camping stool. He had his mailbox was just chockers full, like absolutely full. So I tried to put the thing, couldn't get it in there. And beside him, where he was sitting smoking his cigarette, like his garden was a mess. There was weeds all over the place. And right beside where he was sitting was a really tall weed, and it grows. We'll get to this behind me. We'll get to this in a minute, right? But the weeds grow here in summer, just woof, up they come. And he's sitting there next to this weed. He could have reached out and pulled it out. And here's this huge weed that's obviously, you know, 3 or 4 weeks old, right at his front door, right next to his leg, and he's just leaving it sit there. And it just seems to be that one reason is, and I spoke to a couple of people about this recently, just sort of feeling people out for their opinions. One popular opinion is Japanese people don't visit each other much, and we've been making videos recently about the big cars, and the big car and the car is really important because people see that. You know, when people go places and meet people places and go to work and all these other things, people see their car. But usually Japanese people don't visit each other's homes. I mean, there are exceptions. Family will often visit family, and now it's Obon season, so there'll be family visiting each other. But usually friends don't. So usually they won't have a lot of visitors to their house, which means people don't see their house. So often they just don't bother. The other aspect I would suggest is that in places like the workplace and schools and places like that, they have their like routines, you know, that on Friday we all clean the classroom, and at work you'll see work people, we've showed you this on videos before, outside of business, and the people will be outside in their suits pulling out weeds because this is the day that the boss said, okay, we're going to go outside and weed the grounds, and they'll go outside their company in their suits or whatever they happen to be wearing and go out and pull out weeds and sweep the grounds and make everything clean. We've showed you that before. But in their own home, nobody says, right, today's pulling the weeds day. Today's empty the letterbox day. That one baffles me more than anything else, because how can you walk past your letterbox every day that's full? And I mean, I'm not talking about this just one occasion. I'm talking about every time I do this, I come across a bunch of places with these full letterboxes. And 2 or 3 months later, I'll come back in the same place, I'll still have a full letterbox. It's like, what's the point of even putting this newsletter in there? They don't seem to empty it. And that one baffles me, because if I see something in my letterbox, I always pull it out because I want to see what it is, right? I couldn't handle it being full. I couldn't handle it being full and not emptying it, you know. So that one baffles me. The other one is the weeds. The weeds is a funny one. You'll often see gardens really overgrown. I mean, it is summer at the moment, but this is all year round. I do this every 2 or 3 months, and it's all year round. And you'll see like really tall weeds all over the place. It looks like there's nobody living there. But again, the air conditioner's running, the compressor's running outside, the 2 cars are parked outside, you can hear kids inside. They're home. They're home. You know, we know with our neighbours. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. The other funny one I keep seeing when doing that walking is occasionally they'll obviously get inspired and they'll pull out some weeds and leave them in a little pile. And this, again, I see this all the time. Just piles of dead weeds. So they've obviously pulled them out, left them in a little pile, and then left them there, right? And then nobody comes along and says to them, pick those weeds up and put them in the rubbish, right? So they just don't. They just leave these little piles of weeds everywhere, you know? And often the little pile of weed will actually have the tool, the little diggy tool, lying on top of the pile of weeds, where they've stopped pulling out weeds, left the weeds there with the tool on top and just walked away with the tool there, you know. And usually it's the same houses where you see that, you'll see the 2 bicycles lying on their side outside, and really common. I was actually debating when I was walking around today if I should make video, actually show you, but I think just imagining it's enough. I'd feel pretty rude, with the exception of that one. I'd feel pretty rude going around videoing. Look at this shocker of a garden, but it's amazingly common. It really is amazingly common, you know. And you know, you lump that together with, we've talked about before, the guys sitting outside the convenience store at 9 o'clock at night, and obviously, you know, we were told once by somebody that this particular dude does it because he wants to wait until the kids are asleep. He doesn't want to go home while the wife and the kids are still happening. He wants to wait till the kids are asleep before he goes home. So he sits at the convenience store and watches TV and eats noodles. And you'll see it. I think we showed you a video of this once before too. 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, just cars all over the place in the convenience store, and dudes watching television, eating cup noodles, smoking, just sitting there, just waiting. And then they'll go home. They won't tell their wife they were hiding at the convenience store for the last 2 hours. They just come home and make out that they've had another 10-hour day, right? This is the maintaining the illusion. It's the automatic thing. It's what they do. It's the excuse. This is the excuse you'll get for people having these messy gardens and full letterboxes. And I actually said to my wife once something about, we went past someone that we know, and their garden was right out of control. And I said something, and she said, oh, he's probably very busy, right? So not only do they use that as an excuse for themselves, but they'll actually make that excuse for other people if other people are plainly lazy. And they're not. We know these people. Okay, I'll do this one now, right? We know this guy, right? This is the grumpy old guy who lives next door to us. That's his garden, right? And there's nothing wrong with him. He's a couple of years older than me. He doesn't work. He'll sit around outside his place in the morning at 10 o'clock in the morning in his pyjamas reading the newspaper. There's nothing wrong with him. When he wants to, he'll come out and spend a couple of hours with his brush cutter cutting that long grass there. And he's got a funny system. We take 20 minutes with a lawnmower to do our place, which is same size or bigger. and he'll come out and he'll spend 2 or 3 hours with his brush cutter cutting a part of that down, and he'll do that maybe 3 or 4 days or 5 days to get it all done. That's how long it takes him, 10, 15 hours to cut all that down with a brush cutter, because he cuts it down and then he bags it into these big recyclable paper bags, and then he puts it all in the car and takes it to the city dump, right? Which, he watches the unskilled gardener about once every 10 days to 2 weeks, goes out the front here with the lawnmower and goes, brah, and 20 minutes it's done, and there's no cuttings or anything, it's just cut back in. And he leaves his to get like this, and then probably, 2 or 3 times a year, he'll spend a week cutting it down. But most of the time, if you came to visit our house, most of the time, that's what you're going to see next door. That's what it looks like, pretty well all year round. Because when he does finally get around to cutting it, within a couple of weeks, it's back up to being that tall again. So there's only a few weeks a year when it doesn't look like that. So while we're looking over there too, you'll notice he's got fly screens that are torn to shreds and just hanging off the windows. So eventually what happens is those fly screens fall apart so much they actually fall right off the window. And we've had them blow over to our place before. There's one of his fly screens is blown over again. And just doesn't bother. Just doesn't bother. And again, I'm not complaining, but that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. He spends a little bit of time in his front garden, not much, but he spends a little bit of time in his front garden to keep it a bit better than that. But that's what the back one looks like, which is a real shame, because you can imagine if we did to that house what we did to this house, that'd be quite a beautiful house. He's got a lovely little structure there to the right that's featured in some of our videos about rainstorms and things, because the little structure there to the right could be a beautiful little outdoor, sitting outside type structure, but it just all falls apart. And just real lazy stuff too. He's got, when he does brush cut it, there's all in the garden there's old baths that he used to use to collect water for his vegetables that he's just left there. So now they just breed mosquitoes, and just random tools and just random stuff that just lies in the garden, and he'll brush cut around it and not pick it up and put it away. He'll just leave it there, and then 6 months later when he cuts it again, all those tools are still lying there in that long grass. So it's just, a lot of it's baffling. This morning when I was walking around, I had to make this video because it's been on my mind for a while, and then this morning I just kept seeing it. That guy sitting on his front step right next to this huge weed that was within arm's reach. And they pass that weed as they step up to their front door. Every time they come home or go out, they're stepping around this giant weed. And just one big one, I can't remember what you call them, those ones with the big yellow flowers on top. And so he could reach down and pull it out, and this big weed would be gone. And he just didn't, just sitting there smoking his cigarette. Which obviously he goes out there a few times a day. And just the stuff like that's just baffling, that the garden tools just left lying wherever they were using them. They've obviously had a bit of a go and then got bored of it or something, and just dropped the gardening tool where it wasn't gone inside, right next to the kids' bikes usually. And you can see, I mean, at the same time, I'm passing houses that are immaculate. I mean, we do have neighbours in this street that have beautiful gardens that are immaculate, but right next to them will be one like this, and they just don't bother, they just don't bother, just don't make an effort. So it sort of illustrates, and it's not high skilled stuff either, is it? I mean, picking up the tools off the garden, out of the garden, or picking up the push bike, or emptying your letterbox, it's not exactly a skilled, it doesn't really require skill to do that, does it? It just requires a minute of motivation, which they just don't seem to have. I suspect it's those two things combined. Are main points in that is, one is that nobody sees it, and the other one is without someone to tell them. I mean, I've seen this before, that we've talked about this on other videos about other topics, is everything about Japanese society is you're told. A newsletter will come around and you're told that you should do this on this day. You should take out your metal recycling on this day, or you should, the people at work tell you to do everything step by step, and most companies have a meeting every morning, and everybody's told to do everything step by step, and the schools are the same. So common sense and thinking for yourself and sort of self-motivation are just not common things here. And again, we know the exceptions. We know people are exceptions to this. We've got another neighbour who gets up early, often in the morning, he'll be out doing his garden. It's beautiful. You know, so there are exceptions to this, but this is really common. You know, just this morning, just those little coffee cans at the front door. It's amazing how common they are. There seems to be all those dudes, a coffee can with a lid twist, and they use it as an ashtray. And you'll see them sitting outside the door, and right next to there is a full letterbox, you know, and right next to that is a pile of weeds with a tool sitting on top. And what are you doing? All these sort of like they've been beamed up by aliens, where you get all this frozen moments where there's a bicycle lying on its side, there's a couple of tools there that were sort of stuck in the ground, and looks like some aliens beamed these guys up and just left everything that they were using right where it was. So yes, laziness is actually really common in Japan. They just hide it really well. Interesting too, at the moment it's Obon Festival, Obon holiday, summer holidays. And you rarely see people, they're all hiding inside, and they don't lie around where people can see them. So they just sort of hide inside, and we know this because of our friends and family. You know, we've got friends and family who visited, and you go in and the dad's lying on the sofa sound asleep with the aircon on, you know, and they're all, well, it's holidays, I mean, good, everybody should be relaxing, right? But relaxing is not something that most people here do in public. They usually do it really discreetly because they like to give the image that they're really, really busy and really, you know, working hard all the time. But usually it's an illusion. I think there's a bunch of people who watch our videos who are actually living in Japan. There's a whole bunch more that have been here before and spent a lot of time here. So you guys probably have lots of examples of this yourselves, people that you've known here. But probably both sides, probably. You'll probably know people that you knew here that worked really hard, and you'll probably know others that were really good at pretending to. You know, you hear that really common. People who work for big companies here will often tell you about their co-workers who pretend to be working hard all the time, in actual fact really unproductive and don't do much at all. So it's really common. Lazy people. Check it out. Check it out. There it is. There it is right there. He'll be inside reading his newspaper. I mean, it is hot. It's 38, 39 degrees today, but this is all year round. It's not just summer. It's in the cooler months too. So anyway, you get the idea. Don't let people tell you that it's the generalisation that's the myth. Japanese people are really hard-working. Japanese people are really neat and tidy. That's that generalisation that the myth is the myth. As with all those myths, it's based on fact. It's based on the fact that some Japanese people are really hardworking, and most Japanese people are pretty neat and tidy, but not always. Not always. Not when people can't see them or they're back gardening. Right. That garden, it's actually got snakes in it. We've seen snakes crawl out of there, and centipedes. We've seen crawl out of there, and swarms of mosquitoes. If the wind stops at night when it's really hot, if the wind dies down at night, we'll get swarms of mosquitoes come over from those bathtubs he's got over there. And they'll come over and buzz around our house. Anyway, he doesn't have screens on his bathroom either, by the way, which is amazing. He swarms of mosquitoes and no screens on his windows. So it must be intense inside. He's probably got mosquito coils all over the place. So anyway, that was that. More videos coming soon.